question which will insert a lot of energy back into you after the long day of sessions that we had. We have with us today Bala Girisaballa from Microsoft Accelerator India, and he's going to give us a very stimulating plenary session talk on emerging business models for education. Bala is the CEO in residence at Microsoft Accelerator in India. He leads Microsoft's efforts to help later stage startups and entrepreneurs in India to scale up and become successful. I will no longer stand in between you and our plenary speaker, and I welcome Bala to come on stage.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us in the evening today. In my day job, I work with a lot of startups in India as well as outside. There's a program that we run at Microsoft, which is across 7 countries. So we do see what's going on in various ecosystems as well. So some of the learnings that I've had are not my own, but it's also from the startups that I work with. We work with about 750 startups across the global ecosystem. And in India, we have worked with about 150 startups in the past 5 years. Mostly these startups are later stage startups, which means they already have product, they have been in the market, and they have worked with customers. So there's a lot of learning around what doesn't work more than what works. So a lot of points that I have in this in the presentation today is going to be talking about some of the challenges in the models, particularly as pertains to education and the business of education. So I'm more talking about business of education and coming from a point of view of a startup view rather than a large company view. So you would see that the whole presentation is contextualized to that filter. So you can we can have a couple of questions maybe at the end of the presentation, and then I'll take anything offline as well. So looking at it, the way I look at learning overall is that learning is pervasive. We do not stop learning. I mean, learning happens even when you're driving, because you're already continuously updating your models about your traffic or your mother-in-law. It doesn't matter. Learning is there across the board in every form of our lives. So and it's continuous. I mean, there's nothing like a human being by nature, in my opinion, is very curious. Right, so and the curiosity drives a lot of the understanding of the world and the constant updating of the understanding of the world. But I believe in the past 200 years, we've kind of somehow stunted this whole concept of learning being pervasive and continuous. And the way we've approached learning is primarily when we built the education model. The last time we really built it up from ground up was during the Industrial Revolution. Because if you were to look at our current model, it's more like a factory model. You bring people in batches. There are assembly lines, and you kind of cut them out in boxes. You say you're the first grade. You spend 1 year here, and then you go to the second grade. It's a cohort method. You kind of take 40, 50 people in a batch, and you do all you are trying to do is to standardize the set. You standardize everybody, and at the end of it, what you want out of it is a standard output, and that's how they are measured. Your success is measured based on that, and I think this worked for us. It's not like it didn't work for us, because it has brought us to where we are today, right? But I think it comes from a point of view which was set in a context which was about 200 years ago, where you needed to produce skill sets which mimicked the requirements of the society, but particularly industrial society at that point of time. And we've crafted our design around that, and it has helped. But I think the world has changed of late. If you were to look at the past 20, 25 years, a lot of things have changed. And in the past 10 years in India, in my opinion, things have changed dramatically. Sometimes some of the changes, it takes about 25 years for us to even digest and understand culturally. We have been forced to make that adjustment in 5, 10 years in our world today. And that's what makes it very exciting to be at this point of time. I'm very excited about what's going on in our worlds today, much more in terms of what's going on in India, frankly. But at the same time, it puts in a lot of friction in the society, because now the change is so rapid, it is hard for us to kind of contend with it. But some of the things that has changed, for example, 10 years ago, which wasn't the case versus what it is today. Number one, all of us have smartphones in our hands. right? So it's about 350 smartphones in the ecosystem today. It's growing at about 60% every year. Every replacement of a phone is a smartphone today, with 1 GB data free from you know who, and it's kind of, we have become like data poor to by kind of data rich. I'm sure Mohandas Pai would have talked a lot about this particular trend as well. If you were to look at our internet users, actually I think our smartphone will take over in the next 6 months or so. In my opinion, give it another 3 years, I think we will have about 1 billion smartphones in the country. That means everybody having a smartphone. And smartphones, I mean by it, what I mean by it, it's a much more powerful device than just making call. Making call will be a secondary feature of a smartphone, and it won't be the primary reason why you would get a phone. Today, you actually get a phone for other reasons than just making calls, right? So if you were to look at it from YouTube adoption, we are probably the number 2 or number 3 country for Google. Right, so there's tremendous amount of content consumption which is kind of driving it. Everybody, everywhere I see it, including that person who was serving coffee outside when you guys were having your session, he had to spend 2 hours waiting for you guys to get out. You know what he was doing? I thought I'll take a picture. He was sitting there watching something on YouTube, right? So I think if you were to look at our consumption and our time spent pattern, it has considerably shifted because you have a very powerful device in your hand and it's connected. So it changes the way you look at your world. It changes the way your behavior is personally as well as socially. The second one is, I think we are adding about, in the past 15, 20 years, we added about 300 people to the employment pool, employment-worthy pool, but we were able to really employ 150 of them. So there's a gap, and the gap is growing, because if you were to look at another next 10 years, you are talking about another 250 million people joining the employment pool. Where are the jobs for them? And this really puts in a lot of pressure. So much so that if you were to look at the government of India, both at the state government as well as the central government, the number 1 factor that they consider today as a stress factor for the economy is generating meaningful employment for the people who are coming into the employment pool. We graduate 3 million graduates every year. Out of them, 1 million are engineers. Now, where are the jobs for them? So this is exactly the problem that's going to be yawning at us as we move forward. Number 3, young population. Obviously, the demographics would mean that these are post-colonial population. They don't even remember what a freedom struggle looks like. Their aspirations are global. Their aspirations are very different. They are born in an era where you don't tell them what to do, but you actually have to look at them in a very different way. This is showing up in schools. This is showing up in colleges. This behavior is showing up at workplace as well. In fact, the HR function in a corporate has completely changed to being you will follow these policies to let me partner with you and develop what you want out of this career. There are kids who actually want to retire at about 27, 28 and go do something else. They want to learn scuba diving. They want to come back later, do something else. It's become a gig economy for them. It's no longer a continuous 20-year employment for them at all. So if you were to look at it, the aspirations are very different as well. And the fourth angle is that from a rural-urban perspective, education and access to education becomes primary key driver for social mobility. For people to really move up on the social scale, education becomes very critical. And finally, we are no longer contented with a canvas which is domestic in nature. People are sitting here and watching what's going on in other parts of the world, which actually, again, comes back to you in a very different way as to how you engage with these guys. So if you want to look at it, this is what has changed in the past 10 years. Now, as old, about 200-year-old educational system has to contend with these changes, which has completely dramatically shifted the canvas and the rules of the game, right? So this is exactly where I want to talk about what's going on here. Currently, in terms of the dollar, about $250 million of online digital education market exists in India today. As we look forward, in about 5 years, it's going to grow 8x. It's going to grow 8x, right? So then, if you were to look at the number of users, about 1.5 million users are there online today, consuming some kind of digital online educational, content or services. That's going to grow about 7-8x, right, in the next 5 years. So if you were to look at it, it's a growing economy. Whichever vector you look at it, this is just going to take off. Sometimes it's hard for you to understand. You'll say, oh, I don't see much of change, perceptible change around me, but this is a more exponential. It's not like a linear. What happened last year is not what's going to happen next year. It's not what's going to happen the year after. It's going to start as a trickle, but it's going to build up the momentum in a massive manner. And let me talk about a little bit about where is the momentum coming, particularly when you talk about the education as a business and as a sector. There are 5 areas, and I mapped these 5 areas to 5 parts of your life stages of human being. Number 1, you are in your K-12 phase. In K-12 phase, a lot of things are changing. So there are some startups who are playing in the primary supplemental school education space. And then you go into the college. You have to prepare for the college. There's a test prep kind of startups are there. There are lots and lots of them who are there. Career choice. Today, it's when I grew up, there were like 3 career choices that I had to contend with. And those are not choices, by the way. Those actually are determined based on the marks you get. Right? So clearly you are channeled through that, but today that's not the case. So there's a career choice aspect is also becoming very, very critical. They do a lot of personality tests and map you to what opportunities are there globally as well. There's also counseling aspect which actually comes in. There are lots of software doing that. Then you go into the university and then you are looking at the higher education space. There is also career counseling at that point of time, which is a little different than choosing your next level of discipline. Then as you are embarking on your career, you have to constantly upskill. There is a high rate of obsolescence of your skills today. What you have today is considered as currency. In 5 years, it's going to go away. Automation and other stuff which is going to really move the needle for you. Therefore, reskilling and certification is a very key critical part. So a lot of startups who are actually looking at that angle as well. And finally, there's an ongoing aspect of it, which is a social. I want to learn cooking. I want to learn photography. I want to travel. Therefore, I want to learn different languages. All of them bundled together with what I call as the casual learning or social learning aspect, or rather ongoing learning part of it. If you want to look at it broadly, these are the 5 buckets in which you would see business being organized when it comes to what we call as edtech. Now, it's actually very fancy to put the word tech to anything else and shrink the previous word, like edtech. Retech is for retail. Medtech is for medical. I have no idea, but this seems like a very fancy thing to do. So edtech is it. So with this, I think if you were to look at it, how does this map to your 250 million? The blue boxes are the 250 million breakup across these 5. Obviously, there's like a reskilling seems to be the number 1 today, predominant. But you can clearly see the growth being somewhere else. The growth is going to be, as you move forward, in the next 5 years, they anticipated the growth is in the primary and the schooling side of the business, and obviously the reskilling part also continues to grow as well. So overall, across the board, it's pretty much a lot of growth there. And if you want to look at the maturity of these technologies, this is how it comes out. The maturity on the left side, it's a x-axis is your the maturity, on the y-axis is the adoption in the market. And obviously, the one which is highly adopted today is the reskilling. If you were to look at it, Simply Learn is have you guys heard about Simply Learn? Right, so Simply Learn is one of our cohort company. They've just recently graduated from our Accelerator program. They're in that space. They are for career professionals who want to get some certification so they can get that bump in their career going forward, or get their currency back, one of the two, right? So that's the space right now where you see a lot of action. That's because there is paying propensity from the consumer, both from a corporate angle as well as personal angle as well. There are lots of certification courses you would want to pay if you think you're going to get that promotion, or if you're going to get some bump up in your salary, right? So that's where you see a lot of adoption, and that's where the offering is a lot more mature. And where you see the adoption is being low, but where its kind of offering is also not as mature is on the higher education side of it. And if you were to see one of the challenges there, we will see, we'll unpack this as to why this is the picture right now, and somewhere in between is your language and casual learning parts of it. We'll unpack why this is the case, few slides down the line, right? So, I mean, why do you think people are coming to, why do you think this online or digital learning is going to become, is becoming attractive? There are like 8 key drivers of the growth for this, and this is nothing really fancy. I think a lot of it is very intuitive. Obviously, it starts with the cost. The cost obviously is a lot more incremental compared to you doing it offline. A course, let's say a PMP course, certification course, online is about $300 to $500. versus offline, it's about $4,000 to $5,000. It's a 10x kind of difference, wherever you kind of see it. So obviously the cost is a big driver of this. Number two is the availability. It's available a lot more pervasive, a lot more easy. The friction in terms of availability is much less. Number three is everybody is looking for that employability or improving their chances either in the school system or in the employment sector. The fourth is, like we talked about it, government is definitely very, very worried about this aspect of employability. Therefore, there's a lot of push and SOPs from government policy perspective as well as the programs point of view, which is there. Number five, it's a generic growth of the internet penetration. We are becoming second largest in terms of the internet penetration across the world. So which is fantastic, and it's going to just keep growing up. I think the smartphone usage goes along with that. That together is there. Obviously, the disposable income as well as the fact that we have living with a young demographic is also plays a massive role. And this actually mimics with respect to what we see. This is the funding situation in the market. I would say, even though the funding is healthy, I don't think it's in the top. I see fintech startups getting a lot more share of the wallet with respect to funding. Education has been struggling a little bit, and we'll see why. And I think it's going to change a little bit, but it's going in the right direction, but it's kind of lagging behind other sectors. Medical, for example, is higher than education, but education is one of the top five in terms of the sectoral focus for investors. Now, if you were to look at it, why digital? What changes, particularly in the digital in terms of the differentiation? Is number one is that something digital can do that an offline world cannot do. It is completely paradigm shift. It's the 5 paradigm shift factors that happens. Number one, it is adaptive. It is completely adaptive. It responds to how you engage with it. For example, if I can put together a model for you and a learning model for you, based on how you perform in the model, I can adapt to it, which is very different. You can't do this offline, right? So that's number one. Number two is access anytime, anywhere, anyhow kind of access is the other one. Number three is the amount of content, both in terms of the depth and the breadth, is amazing, because the amount of resource available from a content perspective, and there are multiple different models which are coming up out there as well, is quite amazing. Number four, obviously, the cost. Number five is quantized learning, which means you learn at a quantum level rather than at a whole subject level. You can pick and choose the areas. We're more surgical in terms of how you can learn. And that delivery of the surgical learning or the quantized learning is, again, very, very different compared to how we have been traditionally approaching the learning aspect of it. Some of the companies who are actually in this space, Skillshare, it's a global company. They actually put together an amazing set of courses across various disciplines, and the Duolingo, which is in the casual space. I've used them all the time. Wherever you go, you just pick up, and then it's fun to do because they gamify the whole experience in a fantastic manner. And number three is Avagma. Avagma is basically connects you to the colleges based on what your interests are, and tells you which colleges you can apply. Because if you were to look at it, there are thousands of colleges you can apply, hundreds of programs within the colleges you can apply. The choices has multiplied exponentially. So they actually help you put it together. Not just that, you don't have to sit and do apping for that. You set up profile once, and they will map it to all the entire apping process, right? So then you have Simply Learn. We talked about it. They're doing amazingly well, both in India as well as outside. And My Private Tutor, now you're getting into more like your Uber kind of model, where I want a tutor right now near my place, and I will get it at this point of time. So it kind of connects peer-to-peer. Then Top Hat, which is actually in a B2B space, where they are powering educational institutions to deliver better quality education through digital platforms. Edmodo plays in a very different space. It's actually does the support system of it. It connects the teachers, the administration, and the students, and everybody else together on a platform. So from a communication perspective, they make it seamless and easy. And Newton, there's a more adaptive learning. They can actually know the students' behavior, what they like, what they don't like, what models do they like, and then adapt to that and then help them do that. Imbibe writes here. They're doing a really fantastic job. Right now, they are in the space of test prep. They actually guarantee X percentage of increase in your, the IIT JEE score, right? They guarantee that. So the reason is it's highly adaptive, they know the moment you take certain initial set of diagnostic tests, they actually know where you are, they know what your gaps are, they know how to fill it. Right? And all of it is delivered through artificial intelligence and ML models. It's not like somebody sitting in the back end and doing it. Now, what they are now getting involved, now next stage, is they have completely taken the entire rubric of an entire pedagogy, broken down into quantization, and come up with, if I give you a diagnostic test, I will know, like a doctor, I will know what things are in range, what things are out of range, where I need to focus on, which aspect of it I need to deliver, and etc. and all that. So they are getting into that space. Very smart folks. Then you have VideoKen. VideoKen is a video learning platform where we've got, like, for example, this is a talk, 30-minute talk, and I'm talking about 10 different concepts, and now this talk is going to be uploaded on some portal, but for you to know what content is there within the talk, unless somebody indexes it, you won't know it. So what VideoKen does is they automatically index it, because they have speech recognition, video recognition technology to say, Bala in this 30 minutes spoke about these 5 different topics. And when you click on a blurb, it automatically takes you to that particular segment where that particular topic has been discussed. So things like that. So I just wanted to kind of give you guys a sample of what's coming, because we spoke about the 5 different buckets of what edtech startups are doing, but primarily this kind of gives you, there are actually hundreds of other startups, but I thought I'll give you a sample of what's going on in this particular space. Now if you were to look at it, one of the things I'm really excited about the education technology, and now coming to the business side of it, is that typically there are like 4 models, and none of the, if I'm delivering a lecture in IIM Bangalore, if I don't have 2x2 grid, right, I'm kind of probably going to be thrown out, right? So I kind of created this grid just for you guys. Right. So number one, if you were to look at it, edtech is one space where I saw all the business models playing out. Typically in any space, 1 or 2 are the dominant models, but in edtech I see all the 4 playing out very well. Like for example, you have a lot of B2B coming in, and there's a lot of C2C coming in as well. So there's different models which actually plays out differently, and I will talk about where are the natural gravitational pull for each of this model. Right. So if you were to look at it, across these 5, you will see that mostly it's kind of spread across, and multiple models apply across each of these buckets that we talked about. And if you were to look at it, if I'm giving you a different view to this 5 sectors I talked about, subsectors that I talked about, and then if you actually break it down into a different lens, you can talk about it as it being a formal, it being semi-formal, or it being like informal. For example, going to school, going to college is a very formal, structured learning and education. And what you do in your career, right, like for example getting certifications and all that stuff, is more in a semi-formal, structured, it's an environment. And what you learn, like learning a language or learning photography skill or learning cooking skills or dancing and stuff like that, is more like a casual, is more of an informal. And the reason this categorization was important is because the business model that is prevalent in a particular software or a startup is based on these 3. For example, in the first one, what we notice is that direct monetization is very much possible. Right? If you're going to be selling to colleges, selling in a structured manner, you will make money through direct monetization. However, on the right-hand side, which is the informal and the Duolingo kind of startups, they're not going to make money. I'm not going to pay them anything at all, right? So I will use it only if it's free. I won't use it if it is not. So like what Jeff Bezos said, if you're not paying, it's not Jeff Bezos, somebody else. I'm probably misquoting him. Somebody else said, if you're not paying for a product, you are the product. So on the left-hand side, you're selling a product, therefore you're getting money. On the right-hand side, you're not paying anything, you're using it free, so you are the product. They package you and sell it. Right? So pretty much the monetization has to be indirect monetization, which is they do insights and they package you, segment you, and sell it digitally, obviously. So this is the overall kind of your spectrum of how these business models emerge. And there are multiple ways in which people make money. One is you pay subscription, you pay license fee, you do paper session, paper use, or content sharing. There are quite a lot of models which actually is there. If you were to look at, and this is my final slide, and after this I will stop. If you were to look at across these 3, this thing, The reason why in some cases people pay you money versus in some cases people don't pay you money is attached to the value they get out of it, right? So for example, when you're going and selling it to colleges and universities and schools, the value is primarily either you reduce my cost or increase my efficiency or get me more money, right? And then you can then lay claim for a percentage of that. And therefore, the business model is license-based model. You'll go and say, I will save you 20% of the cost. So what is my cost? $100. So you save me 20%, so you save me $20. So therefore, the license fee is going to be $5. Something like that, right? So there is a clear path to licensing there, and it becomes very clear. And it also ends up being a B2B model. Like for example, you can't sell direct. You have to sell through a solution partner or some other channel. So that becomes very prevalent on that. So the value there is about revenue, efficiency, cost savings, and the models are typically license, subscriptions, purchase orders, think of it. It's more of a B2B model there. In the middle, in the test rep, the value is in performance, that you are delivering some performance to the, like, I'm going to get you a certificate. I'm going to improve your score. I'm going to, get you a promotion. So that's a value that they get. So it's a lot more, it's tangible, not as tangible as the left side, but it's tangible, but it's semi, right? So this is where the model is subscription based because it's tied to a incident value. It is not a systemic value. It is an incident value. For this exam, I'm going to pay you because you're helping me pass this exam. So it's more of a, you'll see more of a pay-per-use, pay for certificate, like Coursera. You can audit a course and it's free, right? So, and then if you want a certificate, they only charge you for the certificate. So it's fantastic because in digital world, the incremental cost is zero. So you might as well, if you shut out somebody, you are losing because at least you have an incentive to keep somebody in the system. If they don't pay you for now, they will at least pay you a year from now because for you the incremental cost is zero. So given that, I think the models are emerging to say, you know what, take it free. But if you want a certificate, there's a tangible value that you're getting out of it, you wouldn't mind forking some money for that. Right? So if you want to look at these models, I think it's amazing how in education slowly we are moving towards this incident value, systemic value, or some other social value part of it. So there are paper certificate, paper content, and paper use and everything else. There are different models that actually emerge there. And on the right-hand side, clearly, I don't think anybody pays, right? So there are lots of guys, we learn Hindi, we learn Kannada, we learn languages, or we learn some cooking skills and social skills. It's validation. What they get out of it is primarily validation. So they get some joy, some enrichment. So it's very, very loosely associated. What value would you put for it, right? So there's no tangible value that you get out of it. So obviously you have to look for money somewhere else. And the only way you would look for money is bringing as many people in, and then you can get some brands to pay for it. So it's an indirect monetization where you sell on advertisement, where you sell on brand endorsements or brand insertion of it. Like for example, some consumer brands wouldn't mind coming and talking about their products in a way that doesn't look very advertising-ish these days. Everybody hates advertisement, but you can be talking to someone in a relevant manner when they need something in a way that doesn't look like marketing. And there are various opportunities for you to monetize that. And brands today put a premium for that. And brands today put a premium for the more segmentation and talking to people, relevant people at the relevant point of time. I think there are two vectors from on the right-hand side which become very clear. Is that am I talking to the right person? And the second is am I talking to the right person at the right time? Because monetization can happen fantastic if these two merge together, and which most of the platform folks have figured out how to do. They know when you want what, and they will deliver at the time. Because when I am looking for renewing my car insurance, at the time, even a call center person calls me, I would look at that call as, my God, you are a savior. But one day later, he's a pest. Right? So the relevance in terms of the time, it becomes very critical from a monetization perspective. And this is where technology can deliver to you at the time when it is needed. And on the right-hand side, that becomes more critical. Right? So those are the dimensionally how you have to look at it. On the left-hand side, it's the student is going to be in the course for a year, maybe 10 years. So it's a lot more systemic value that comes out of it. So hopefully this kind of unpacks as to what are the challenges, because one of the things I help startups is in actually on this side. They come in and they say, they're on the right hand side, they are social startup, social learning startup, and they'll say, I want to license it. Like, no, it just doesn't work this way. Then this kind of, we go through this exercise and they understand, connecting the value versus the licensing model that is very relevant to that particular value. I think if you were to look at it this way, I think a lot of us will understand what's going on in the market, why somebody will pay, why will not pay, instead of having a very generic conversation of saying, oh my God, there's no money in edtech. That's not the case. There is a lot of money. It's except that you have to match it in the right way and deliver it in the right way. And even the tech platform, what it has to do is very different from each of this side, that side of the spectrum to this side of the spectrum. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much. Hopefully this has kind of given you some sense of this industry, where we are going, what are the business models, and all that stuff. Thank you. So Joseph, we have some time for Q&A, or should we? Okay, great.
Thank you for your presentation. Throughout this conference, we've been seeing that these different companies which offer different types of MOOCs and platforms, they struggle with the completion rate. It may be ranging from 10% to maybe 23% or something like that. And one of the major reasons is the students don't have that touch and feel experience. So in this aspect, when do you think virtual reality is going to come into MOOCs and basically supplement that and probably increase this?
Yeah, so the virtual reality is, there are some challenges with the virtual reality because it's not like a easily accessible devices and the form factors, right? So you need a little more infrastructure of a virtual reality. It's not like you can sit in a bus and then go through a course in virtual reality. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. And so what happens with virtual reality is that it is useful in certain spaces. For example, training pilots for aircraft, virtual reality really works. Industrial machines and support staff training, virtual reality works fantastic, because then they're not like sitting in a casual environment and doing it. They're walking into a setup and where it will work well. Architects are using virtual reality quite well. So if you want to look at from a learning perspective, immersive environments kind of thing, that virtual reality works quite well. But to me, I think it is, we are a little far away from that, right? So you will see more virtual reality on the right-hand side, which is your casual side of it, but it's more for the jazz than real value, right? So if you expect that, hey, I'm a virtual reality learning startup and let people open up their wallets, won't happen. They'll come for joy and fun factor. But as you know, the fun factor is hard to monetize. So don't expect monetization right away. So this is where people have struggled and they failed. So I would say stick to these foundational elements of it and stick to basics.
I am Sanjay. My question is completely out of the context. Probably my question is like a parent. Like I'm a father of 2 kids and I just downloaded Byju. Without familiarizing to my son, I already started getting calls from Byju. We have a package of 18,000. I said, let my kid familiarize with the software.
Right.
So as a parent, generally, we parents hate to give mobiles to our kids.
Right.
But at the same time, we cannot stop them from learning.
Right.
Now, as a parent, right from the formal education to informal, in what way as a parent I should groom my kids in order to get familiarized with this technology, and in what way as a parent I can help them in their career building from primary school to informal, because my kids are in 5th standard and 3rd standard. Right. So I need your suggestion on this.
Yeah. I think parents are, from an education technology perspective, parents are seen as a problem.
As a businessman.
From in the business like 2x2 matrix, parents appear in the problem side, not on the solution side, because I think there is a mismatched expectation. For example, parents say, when you ask them, they say, I want to provide learning environment to my kids, and then the next day they say, how much marks did you get? Right? So there is a and I'm a parent, and that's how I behave as well. So in a structured environment within schools, and the reason is we're also torn between doing well in an academic structured environment, but at the same time we are seeing that there is so much learning and fun which is happening outside in the informal side. Frankly, when we grew up, most of our learning was on the formal side. Today, your world has kind of opened up, and there's a lot of informal side. So it's hard for you to balance between these two. Frankly, I would say just let it go. I don't want parents to really worry too much about Byju's or anything else. Do what your kids enjoy. However, one thing which happens, in my opinion, where parents are becoming on the solution side is on the middle, which is career counseling. I've seen more parents to say that, my God, I don't understand this landscape as much as I used to understand earlier. There are far too many choices, so they are adopting a lot of college courses. They're actually using a lot of software startups for that, like Avagma kind of thing, and they are using it for career counseling for their children. What should my child do as they grow up? That type of thing is where parents are starting to, I'm seeing that there's a lot more synergy between what a startup offers as value and what parents see it as value. We can probably have a longer conversation offline.
Yeah, excuse me, I'm here.
Oh, sorry.
So I have this confusion, okay? There's one fact that you've mentioned.
Did I create the confusion?
Yeah, you did in some
Okay.
sense. So the thing is, a lot of people get educated and then there's an unemployment problem.
Right.
But one business model that we have heard today and yesterday is that, let's get the whole country educated. So what kind of a model is this? Are the educated people already unemployed? Now you want to get more people educated.
Right.
So there's something I'm unable to resolve right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the reason you are not able to resolve is the definition of education is not same. In one side you are talking about literacy, on the other side you are talking about employability, and these are two different benchmarks. And I think what we are talking about, let's get whole country educated, is to pass the bar on the literacy side, but not pass the bar on the employability side. And that's where the gap is. Frankly, it's not a confusion, but it's a problem. And it's a recognized problem, and we need to solve it. So, and also on top of it, we have to contend with, earlier we thought technology was a boom because it created so much jobs. But now we are looking at technology as, I don't think we are calling it as a curse, but somewhere we are not so sure, right? Because as more and more jobs are getting automated, right? So I think as automation creates new jobs, definitely, that I believe that automation will create new jobs. But the question there is, are they going to create the type of jobs that we can take part in? And how many jobs are they going to create? So this is where I think the current contention is.
Hi, Bala. This is Amit here from Fidelity Investments. So my question to you is connected to the subject of learning, but slightly away from the topic. So you, in your role, when you are trying to drive value for so many of these startups in the Accelerator road, what is your own learning style? How do you keep yourself updated with everything that's around you?
So were you there when I gave the talk at Fidelity? Yeah, so you probably know my answer. So, right? So I've been following a principle, and I wouldn't advocate it to everybody. It just worked for me, but it's each of you can have different styles. My learning style is I completely deconstruct myself and reconstruct myself every 2 to 3 years. That's the time horizon I've given it to myself, because I see that the rate of obsolescence of whatever I do is very high. And unless I deconstruct actively and deliberately, it won't happen. I'll find myself on the other side of the line where I'm just getting redundant everywhere, right? So every 3 years, in the past 10 years, I've never stayed in a job or a particular role within a company for more than 2 to 3 years. I have actively made myself redundant, and then I reconstruct. So that's the learning, and I think more and more, as you see, that's what will be there, because the churn in technology and employability definition is shifting so rapidly that active learning, which is why I'm very excited about the middle part of it, because there's a continuous learning. We talk about continuous learning, but you could have gotten away without it 10 years ago, right? But today you can't. 2 years, and then you will find yourself completely out of depth, and things have changed rapidly. And that's the world we are going to be living in for the next 15, 20 years. And I'm only talking about 15, 20 years because after that I'm not going to be around to know what happens. So.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Bala. I think you inserted a new dimension to our conversation since yesterday. We spoke policy, pedagogy and technology, and now we also have a bird's eye view of the business side of things in EdTech. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I request Professor Jose to hand over a memento as a small token of our appreciation.
So I just want to say a word. This is such a fantastic conversation. I just realized I need to deconstruct myself. The last 20 years I've been doing the same things. But that said, I think it's such an inspiring note to stop this conference with. And we couldn't have got we couldn't have had a better speaker to conclude our conference with. I think on a note of caution, but on a note of hope. And of course, with a sense of humor. Thank you so much for this. It's been fantastic. Thanks. And I have to thank Bala because our sessions got delayed, and he still waited very patiently, and he still retained his sense of humor. I think we need to do